hour. But what was interesting to me, and I think this is really important, is, he just took us on a wonderful tour of this fast diversifying country of ours. And these kids, as I know all of you believe, these are not my kids, these are our kids. And when you think about it, these kids are our strategic advantage in this international world economy that we live in. But I want to show you the data that makes it pretty darn clear that right now we are squandering that strategic advantage and systematically obliterating what these kids bring to us. So let me walk you pretty quickly through some data, and just let me say in advance that I know I'm going to go way too fast because there are like way too many slides here, especially in the time we have remaining. So just know in advance that all of what you're about to see we'll post on our website in a couple days so you can take a look to your heart's content. So when you look at the numbers nationally, as you all probably know, there are about 4.7 million English learners in our public schools. Roughly 2/3 of those are in the elementary grades, with the remaining third sort of spread across middle and high schools. As all of you know, all states have some English learners, but they are pretty unevenly distributed, from roughly 1 in 3 kids in California public schools to roughly 1 in 100 in West Virginia. So the question is, all right, so there's 4.7 million of them. How are they doing? Are they achieving to high standards? Answer, not even close. What you're looking at here is 4th grade reading performance. There's not a person in this room who doesn't know how important it is that kids master fundamentals in reading by 4th grade. What you're seeing on the left-hand side is what those numbers look like today for English language learners. Roughly 7 out of 10 are trapped at that red, sort of below basic level, which is a very dangerous signal about how well they are prepared. And as Chris said earlier, about 7 in 100 are performing at the proficient or advanced level. The numbers, as you can see on the left-hand side, look quite different for non-English language learners. What happens when you move up to 8th grade math numbers, as you can see here, not very different. Again, roughly 7 out of 10 trapped at that below basic level, only 5%, 5 out of 100 at the proficient level. And unfortunately, there's not been much improvement in those numbers over time. This is a look at the performance of English learners versus non-English language learners, with English learners in the purple there. As you can see, essentially flat since 2003, with some improvements for non-English learners. When you look at the numbers in that dangerous below basic category, as you can see here, we made a tiny bit of progress in reducing those numbers, but very little in 10 years, and not progress at all in moving the numbers in that green category. When you move over to mathematics, as you can see here, a little bit more improvement, but not nearly the improvement that we've made with non-English learners. The result being the gap between English learners and non-English learners today is actually wider than it was 10 years ago. When you look again at the numbers in that dangerous red below basic category, as you can see, a little bit of progress here, down from roughly 3 out of 4 to roughly 7 out of 10. Again, not much progress, in fact, no progress at all in getting kids to the proficient level. Now, when you look at, the question is always when you have a group of states here, well, are some states doing better than others here? And everybody wants to use NAEP data to try to figure that out, because for now, at least, it's the only common assessment we have. When you look at the data initially, you say, whoa, there really is something to learn from here. What you're looking at is English learner performance here, state by state in 4th grade reading. State on the left, doing the best. State on the right, doing the worst. The difference, so you know, between best and worst is about 4 years of learning. Okay, so very substantial difference between best and worst. And states on the left that appear to be doing the best, Maryland, South Carolina, Ohio, and Kansas. Over on the right, those with the weakest performance appear to be Hawaii, South Dakota, Utah, Arizona, and Alaska. And I say appear for a reason I will show you in just a minute. When you look at growth over time, also big differences in who's making progress and who's not. If you look at Ohio, for example, there's been about a 31-point gain in the last 10 years for performance of English language learners in fourth grade reading. That's somewhere between 2 and 3 years worth of learning, which is really nice progress. This is a look at math, same thing. Again, states on the left with the highest performance: South Carolina, Arkansas, Kansas, Virginia. States on the right with the weakest performance appear to be California, Rhode Island, Oregon, Utah, Connecticut. When you look at improvement, again, Ohio stands out with about 20 points gain, more gain than for any other state in terms of English language performance in the last 10 years. 20 points, again, is roughly 2 grade levels or 2 years worth of learning. However, and this is the important part here, it's very tempting to try to use these numbers to say, okay, here's somebody we can learn from because this state's performing so much better than another state, or this state's growing so much than another state. But it turns out that some of you have very different exclusion practices than others when it comes to the National Assessment of Education Progress. This is what that looks like. So any state that's above that blue line has, shall we say, unusually high exclusion rates, with Maryland right up there worst of all, excluding 60% of its English language learners from the NAEP fourth grade reading assessment. Other states with high exclusion rates are Delaware, Georgia, Kentucky, and North Dakota, and Tennessee. And others assess large proportions of their students with accommodations. Okay, that's what accommodation rates look like state by state. So as you can see, very, very different rates at which students are provided accommodations. So when you look at the NAEP data and you think, well, this state's doing a lot better than our state is, maybe we could learn something there, but then when you go to the data, you see 2 things. They might be excluding a lot of their students, or they might be providing more accommodations than we are, which make the things very much not comparable. This is what it looks like in terms of the number of states that are testing kids without accommodations. So when you look at it on the whole, and again, this is something for you to look at later, what you basically see is the yellow sections there are kids who are assessed with no accommodations, and as you can see how different those are, which again sort of undermines the utility of looking at NAEP to find high performers from which you can learn. Take, for example, these 3 states. When you look at the numbers, you say they have roughly the same performance for their English learners: Maryland, South Carolina, and Ohio. But it turns out they're very different in how they assess English learners. With Maryland, as I pointed out early, assesses only 13% of its students without accommodations, and only 39% of its students at all, compared to South Carolina that assesses the vast majority of its students without accommodations and excludes only a tiny handful. Patterns much the same, although somewhat less pronounced in mathematics. That's again a look at exclusion rates in mathematics. Maryland once again takes the lead here. This is a look at how many kids are assessed with accommodations. And again, you see a state like New York there that provides accommodations for about 70 or 85% of its students, compared to California, only 25%. So again, making the data very hard to compare. And wide variation, as you can see here, in assessing kids without accommodations. Bottom line, once again, the underlying metrics here in terms of who's actually represented by the NAEP numbers you see and how well those numbers represent their actual learning, pretty scary differences. Bottom line is it's probably not a very good idea. Even states, as you can see with these 3, have very similar assessment results on NAEP, but very different ways of assessing their kids. So before comparing state performance on NAEP, it's really crucial to understand the underlying assessment practices in those states. So what about performance beyond elementary and middle grades? Grad rates too can be challenging to compare across states because everybody does it a little bit differently, even though they all say they do the same thing. But the bottom line is there are very big differences here too, with West Virginia, which has 4 English learners, has the highest graduation rates for English learners of 83%, Nevada on the low end with 23%. But again, there's some different metrics underneath those. When you look up at the measures we have in terms of college readiness, bottom line is you basically find, as you can see here, that students who are not native English speakers doing less well in reading, less well in writing, but slightly better than other students in mathematics. Bottom line, when you look at the data where we are now, English learners perform significantly below other students in both reading and math, and the gaps between those two groups over the last 10 years have either been flat or they've actually grown. When you look up at them in high school, they complete fewer academic and advanced academic courses in high school. They're considerably less likely to graduate from high school and less likely to be college ready, especially in reading and writing. The question, of course, is, all right, does it have to be this way? And one of the nice things I think all of you know, we spend a lot of time as an organization looking for schools that are unusually successful in educating different groups of students. And one of the very nice things about that is when you look underneath these statewide averages, there are all kinds of schools that are showing us that these kids actually really can achieve at quite high levels when we teach them at high levels. And those schools are in all kinds of states and school districts. Some are in states and districts that have long served English learners, like this school in Florida, Carlos Finley Elementary School in Miami. Again, student population is mostly Latino, about 57% are English learners. But take a look at their results for English learners here compared to schools elsewhere in Florida. Significantly better performance, and they have that consistently. You see that here. This is a school in Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada. Again, mostly Latino, largely low income. About 71% of the students are English learners. This school, once one of the lowest performing schools in the state of Nevada, now consistently one of the highest performing schools in Nevada. And you can see their data here for English language learners. What's most interesting is how successful they are, not just in getting kids to the proficient level on the state assessment, but in getting them to the advanced level on the state assessment, with advanced levels of performance among English learners that are twice those of Nevada as a whole. Imperial High School in California, again, a school that has served a significant number of English learners for many, many years. But look at their progress and performance compared to others in the state of California. Those are their results for English language learners compared to California results for the same kinds of students. But it's not just in states like Florida, Nevada, and California that have long had English learners. We're also seeing these kinds of successes in states that are newer to the English learner phenomenon, like Arkansas. The Queen Elementary School, a school in rural northwest Arkansas, has extraordinary results through really focusing on kids who come in without English skills. Again, as you can see here, their results compared to schools elsewhere in Arkansas for English learners, significantly better performance than the state as a whole. This is a look at advanced level performance. Again, these schools are rarely comfortable in just getting to proficient. They clearly make it to advanced as well. Look at their results for English language learners. 81% of their students hit the advanced level on the state assessment, compared to less than half of those in the state of Arkansas as a whole. These schools differ dramatically, as you can guess, in both the states they're in and the districts they're in. But when it comes to educating English learners, they have certain things in common. When you talk to the principals and teachers in this school, they are very clear about the things they have in common. What you're looking at up on the screen shows what they say in describing their success with English language learners. especially the focus on academic vocabulary and building that in very systematic ways. These schools leave nothing about the building of academic vocabulary to chance. They also are very methodical in acknowledging and acting on what you and I both know, and that is these kids need extra time and extra support in order to achieve their potential. And these schools are absolutely methodical about identifying English language learners and making sure they get the extra assistance, especially one-on-one, that they need to succeed. But the important thing to understand about these schools and also about the states and districts that are moving ahead is they don't move English language learners in isolation, right? There isn't a school in the country, to my knowledge, that's getting strong results for English language learners, but getting poor results for everybody else. It's really about making English language learners not this silo on the side, but weaving these students in to every single thing they do, especially with implementation at Common Core. So just a couple of thoughts about what's getting in the way. You know, one of the things we have to talk honestly about when we're talking about English learners is what's getting in the way of more schools having results like the results I showed you in these schools. Quality teachers, as you all know, is the most critical resource of all. But when you look at the data, what you see systematically is low-income kids and kids of color are systematically taught by our least experienced, least well-educated, and least effective teachers. And then when you look in particular at what do they learn in their preparation programs around English language learners and how to teach them, very, very little. As you can see in this NCTQ study, when you ask teachers themselves, what kind of support in terms of professional development did you have to teach these kids effectively? As you can see, only about 1 in 4 of our teachers have had any kind of professional development on EL students. What about issues of funding? Everybody in this room acknowledges that it costs more, right, to help kids who have extra needs to achieve. And yet, when you look at the data nationally, you look at both the between state differences and the within state differences, what you see very systematically is low-income kids and kids of color tend to be congregated in districts where we simply spend less on their education. In fact, when you look at our biggest English language learner concentrations, what you see very systematically is the states with the biggest concentrations of English learners also are just coincidentally some of the lowest spending states in terms of per student expenditures. What about course taking opportunities? You know, when you look at high school graduates, what you see is very, very few remain classified as English language learners. But when you look at the courses they took in high school, what you see is there are fewer academic credits, fewer in the core subjects, and fewer in particular in the advanced courses that all of us know are essential to building actual college readiness. So what are some things to think about as you think about moving forward? First, there are a set of things that every state needs to ask itself about its own English language learners, and these are just some of the basic questions. How many do we have? Are the numbers growing? Where are they? How are they distributed? Do they have adequate opportunities to learn? And if you think you know the answer to that, how do you know? How do you know? How are they performing? What do reclassification rates look like? And what happens to these students after they reclassify? Most of the research suggests English learners need help post-reclassification. Are students in your states getting that? There are also some policy issues that every state has to wrestle with, criteria for identifying and for reclassification, standards and assessments in terms of who's being assessed and with what kind of accommodations, what kind of supports are students, English language learner students getting, as well as their teachers. How do we weight EL subgroup performance in our accountability system so our educators know they actually matter? How are our teachers prepared and certified? And certainly among the most important of all, how are we communicating with our parents and students' families? So one final thought I want to leave you with as I turn this back over to Dave. You know, when you look at the data over time, it's very easy to think you know, we're sort of on the right track here in terms of when you look at each generation of immigrants, by the third generation, it sort of looks like everything takes care of itself. This, though, was a study that the Urban Institute did a few years ago that continues to haunt me today. What you're looking over here are secondary school kids, okay? These are first generation. These kids' parents were born in the US, right? And these kids were born in the US. These kids' parents were born in the US. How does that happen? How does that happen? We still, so yes, things may be taken care of themselves on average, but when you ask, do we have this group of kids who were not only born in this country, but whose parents were born in this country and are still struggling with English? Shame on us. Thank you very much.